Not He Who Tells. Chapter 4. Lunatic Compass. Cold engulfed me like a maw. A dank and still mist hung in the air, coalescing in the glow of the neon and making greasy nimbuses around the arc sodiums in the lot. I stopped dead on the decrepit sidewalk and suddenly knew, with a certainty that was as solid and unforgiving as a January gravestone, that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't crazy. Oh shit, oh Christ, if only I'd just been fucking crazy. My knees stopped working, and without realizing it, I folded into a penitential kneel on the border of the sidewalk and the gravel lot. The crotch of my jeans was hot, damp, and I very distantly felt urine running freely down my legs. My eyes bulged. The skin of my face tightened, as if someone had grabbed my ears from behind and were cinching them slowly, painlessly, towards the back of my head. My jaw had fallen open, and I was grinning a dog's meaningless, stupid leer. It wasn't that the town of Hanford was gone. It was still there, and it was just as it had been before, when I had parked my navigator and turned my back on it to walk into this bent, poisoned nightmare. I could see the road humping over the shallow dips back into the rusted industrial glow of the outskirts of town. It was that Hanford wasn't alone. Realities crowded in, flickering like images in an old movie-tone newsreel. There were a dozen Hanfords, easily recognizable, almost but not quite perfectly overlaying each other. The road into town was a slow, sickening flux. Divided highway, two-lane blacktop, packed and rutted dirt, pavement disintegrating into gravel, all emerging and receding into each other without moving, defying the eye. Cars blurred over it, merging with trucks and tractors, wagons and pedestrians, all moving along the roads, seemingly at normal speed and with no reference to each other, but with sudden blinding lunges, like film run through a projector with loose cogs and missing teeth in its gears. The city that swallowed the road bulged and heaved. A dozen versions, 100 versions, most nearly identical, but some at the edges of vision, making my eyes water, wildly different, alien and boggling. I turned my head, tore my eyes away, and nearly vomited as rippling realities swam before me, leaping up, darting into my head like spikes, and then retracting again, shuttling past in a ratcheting blur like pegs on a wheel of fortune. Time became plastic, and in that moment each reality introduced itself and read me its biography, and I cataloged each one. They piled up in my head like a waterfall dumping into a shot glass. I clutched my head, not aware I was rolling over, huddling, fetal on the sidewalk, my eyes watering behind clenched lids and my teeth grinding. With my eyes still closed, the pain in my head lessened. It was dreadful, but manageable, and getting better with surprising speed. Slowly, very cautiously, I slitted my eyes. It was better. I could see my navigator, its headlights winking dark facets back at me through the fog. I focused on it because it was familiar and known, blessedly normal and solid in that heaving sea of madness. It looked like home, like safety, like maybe if I could reach it, I could still slip away, escape from this cosmic hole or rift or nexus or whatever the hell it was. I looked back at my navigator, parked less than 20 yards away, familiar and ordinary as an old glove. Come on, I told myself, like a little league coach coaxing a shy batter out of the dugout. You can do it. just head over to your car, start it up, and turn back around. Sure, maybe you stumbled into something bizarre and inexplicable, but by golly, you can stumble right back out of it. You can back out of it the same way the lucky stiffs from Flight 29 stumbled back through the asshole of time and escaped God's cleaning crew, the Langoliers, back there in reality 23,702. It can happen, but only if you have the balls and just a little bit of divine luck. I clenched my eyes and pinched my cheeks, hard enough to make the blood sing in my ears. It did the trick. The white noise in my head cut off with a nearly audible zip, like a record needle being torn along the face of a spinning 45. Sanity may be a fragile thing, but I had gotten pretty accustomed to it, and I wasn't giving it up without a fight. I straightened, backed myself up against the bar's cinder block wall, and slowly slitted my eyes again. The warring worlds resolved, focused into an almost seamless tableau that I could begin to make sense of. The navigator was still there, a solid shape, swimming in a tide of not quite settled but overlapping wheres and whens. I stood up slowly, supporting myself against the cold wall of the bar, keeping my eyes on the navigator in the parking lot, as if it might vanish if I glanced away. I edged away from the wall, onto the grit of the lot, moving like an invalid. Haltingly, I approached the navigator, reaching for it with one hand, feeling the bulge of its keys in my pocket with the other. And yet the strange aura around me persisted, darkening the deceptively prosaic landscape like the shadow of a dragon's wing. As I crept out of the shelter of the mellow tiger, I sensed 4 primary worlds settling all around, resolving like points on a lunatic compass. South was the world of Captain Trips and the Walkin' Dude, white against black, death like an invisible cloak over a blind, goggling ghost Earth. East was world upon world of Maine, hundreds of Castle Rocks, dairies, Salem's lots, havens, and little tall islands. State after state where the locals say, "Eya, the summer people come and go, and secrets never stay buried." North was chaos and insanity, deceptive calm over a thin crust of psychic permafrost, under which lay nothing but madness, gibbering, leering, giggling, with blood leaking from its eyes like teary mascara. And west. Ah, the west was true, binding everything, its single polarity, drawing all and ordering it within itself. It is the first and the last. It is a beautiful flower on a poisonous cactus, and yellow desert sand like talcum, and sandalwood pistol grips hot in the palm, and iron tracks embedded in ancient dead byways, left like 10,000-mile-long totems for those who come after the puzzle over. It all turned about me, swam about me, and watched me as I moved into the gray mist of the parking lot, as the gravel began to grind under my heels like a thing in pain. I heard it, heard them, all the worlds and worlds within worlds, like a chorus of whispers, while all else was listening silence. I moved toward my navigator, sitting no more than 10 yards away, just outside the soft glow of the Mellow Tiger's 2 security lights, and knew then with a sick, bleak certainty that I would never reach it. With every short, weak step, things began to swim up out of the gray mists around me. Dark shapes settled and descended, not so much arriving as simply revealing, like shapes under a mortician's sheet as it is slowly pulled back. Out of the south came the sound of worn boot heels clocking on pavement, each step hitting the air and falling dead, echoless, and the feeling of a smile, a wide, shit-eating, aw-shucks folks grin, baking out of the darkness like chimes from a broken bell. I didn't see the owner of the grin, but I knew he was there, and he knew I knew. From the west came the sound of complicated clacks and a choppy pneumatic hum, the sound of a machine, both large and ancient, with slipping gears and threadbare circuits buried in a clogged, spider-infested carapace. A mechanical, biological bastardization with thousands of years of recorded nothingness cramming its memory banks, and 100 chaotic, fizzing, thoroughly insane ghosts in the remains of its positronic brain. I saw myself as it saw me, a green rasterized shape with a trip-hammering red bulb in its center. I felt the whining hum and clunk of its many-jointed legs, the heat lamp pulse of its dark, hot eye. In the gathering gloom of the east, trickles of dank water ran out into the light of the parking lot like mercury fingers, and a silhouette moved. Large, streamingly yellow shoes spluttered in the water. I willed myself not to look at it, and succeeded, although I could feel its fingers worming into my head, clutching blindly, as if my mind were a prize in one of those mechanical claw games. There was also a grin here, but this one had no humor in it, only death and hate and something enormously, unapproachably alien. And even though I succeeded in not looking with my eyes, in my mind, I saw it, unsheathing from the mist, and, shockingly, it was wearing a paper cap between the tufts of its stage wig, and written on the cap were the words, Oatly Tap. But worst of all, out of the north, surprisingly, came a bone-numbing cold push of air, and the throaty rumble of a 350 cubic inch Golden Commando V8. Headlights, 4 of them in 2 side-by-side clusters, speared the mist and pinned me. The grille was the first thing I saw. Acres of silver chrome with a glinting V in the center. The car pushed through the deepening mist just beyond my navigator, facing me with those heatless silvery lamps. The bumper leered with its inverted grin, and when the car revved, quick ecstatic pumps that unzipped the night air, the front of the car dipped slightly, as if nodding at me. "Come on, old friend, let's play," it said to me without speaking, and I could feel the welcoming, hungry throat of its front seat, wide enough and deep enough to swallow my poor little navigator whole if it wanted. I could sense the warm, green-gold glow of its dashboard, where every station on the old chrome-knobbed radio played Buddy Holly and Fats Domino, and the Wolfman spun the vinyls non-stop all through the night. It's been so long since we rode together, the headlights winked at me, but I can tell you've never forgotten me. And you know what, my love? Even though you've been untrue, I can forgive you. You and I know that there's something special about your first time. I can forgive you because I know you've never forgotten. Because once you've had chrome, you never go home. I wanted to go to it. Wanted to climb into that front seat. 4 doors on this one, because even though they never made a 4-door 58 Plymouth Fury in my world, they did in the world where the story had happened. To slip into that golden oldies glow, get behind the huge, hard, knobby ring of the steering wheel and become one with my love, my unending fury. The past. It was Christine. She of the murderous jealousies. She of the vengeful, delicious 8-cylinder rage. I wanted her, as only I knew that she wanted me. Because she had been my first, in the only way that really mattered. I had killed with her, ridden in the driver's seat, wearing a thin death's head mask, Viva Zeboul, by the name of LeBay. Had no one else ever even suspected that it had been me? Had they not really? Secretly, maybe even not so secretly, as anyone who has read the book more than once would most likely sense, I had rooted for Christine. I had wanted her to win. I delighted in her merciless mayhem and unstoppable bloodlust. Of course, in the end, I had gotten out of the driver's seat, reluctantly, and killed her, smashed her to bits and crushed her into a meaningless cube of red metal and glittering chrome. And that was supposed to be it. It's been fun, sweetheart, but I got a wife back home and responsibilities. So sorry, I know you'll understand. But that hadn't been it. I couldn't let it be it. A week after I thought I'd finished it, I pulled the manuscript for Christine back out of its box, almost unable to do otherwise. The Fornet in my typewriter was screaming for it back. So I rolled another sheet into the old Smith Corona, and guess what, constant reader, as if you didn't already know, she came back. She came back. And when I collected those final 22 sheets of double-spaced paper and read through them, it was as if I hadn't even written them. I grinned as I read, and I suspect it was a grin that looked eerily similar to that dead leer on Christine's steely bumper. "I can forgive you," she whispered to me across the lot as I walked past my navigator towards her cold, cold lights, as her driver's side door clicked open welcomingly and the radio crooned the voice of Paul Anka. "I can forgive you because you've never forgotten me. We can make it like old times, you and me, only better. And I know just where to start. Yes, I do." "Arnie, hey, Cunningham, you four-eyed dweeb, over here." Someone was calling my name? Was that me? Everything was vague, strange, disembodied, across the short waste of the parking lot, calling with something like annoyed urgency, the way a parent might call after a 2-year-old caught exploring the potted ficus with a sandbox shovel. But it didn't matter. I wasn't Arnie Cunningham. My name was LeBay or something, and I was going to go for a ride. I was going to... "Hey!" the voice demanded again, and now its owner was right behind me, moving swiftly across the lot. "I'm talking to you, and I know you aren't deaf. Look at me. Turn around and look at me, goddammit." It wasn't the voice that made me stop and turn. It was the sight of another car. A squat, prissy little rust bucket parked crookedly in a dark corner of the lot, the security lights playing on its filthy windshield and hood like swamp fire. It was the Gremlin. His Gremlin. I could even see the dump zone of the back seat in the murky depths of its interior. Hamburger wrappers with petrified cheese on them, soda cans, and unruly heaps of bloated notebooks crammed with tiny, back-slanted, he was a lefty, I remember now, handwriting. There was a faded bumper sticker in the gloom beneath the left headlight. "Don't ask me silly questions," it read. "I won't play silly games." I turned around. He stood there in the parking lot, looking ridiculous and dour, with his hands stuffed into the deep pockets of his long black coat, the bony glow of Christine's headlights painting the lower half of his body. He shook his head curtly at me, as if confirming something annoying and pathetic. "It was the car, wasn't it? The goddamn gremlin," he said flatly, not really asking. His eyes held me and studied me. Then they flicked away, ticked around the parking lot and the shifting murk beyond. I should have guessed. You always were a sucker for symbolism. Stupid thing barely runs, burns oil like a bastard, but to you, it's the fucking Rosetta Stone. Come on, I need a drink. And he swept around, his coattails flapping limply around his skinny legs. There was no question of my following him. The spell, if that's what it had been, was broken. And seeing his car had indeed been what did it. A car for a car, I guess you could say. Yuck, yuck. Feeling stupid and sheepish, not to mention surprised and cautiously relieved, I did follow him. I expected Christine to howl in rage, to throttle and rev and maybe even charge, but no sound came from behind me. I glanced back once, and the red car looked dark and dirty. Its headlights had turned to tarnished coins in the gray fog, and its right front tire was mostly flat. In the murky gloom, it would have been hard to recognize so much as the make and the year. No sounds came from the dense mist around the parking lot. Silence observed us petulantly. Our footsteps crunched on the gravel and fell out of the air dead. Hope glanced up as he approached the mellow tiger, reaching for the metal handle of the door and heaving it open. He muttered, "Somehow, you always knew there'd be a bar at the bottom of this thing, didn't you?" I followed his gaze as I moved toward the glow of the neons and the sound of the jukebox. The bar was taller than I'd remembered. Ridiculously so, in fact. Its top soared upwards, hundreds, maybe thousands of feet, the cinder block walls melting into dark stone bricks, diminishing in a blur of perspective. Turrets and balconies hugged the face of the tower. Narrow windows marched around its circumference, spiraling up and up, vanishing into a cauldron of sluggishly heaving clouds. And then it was all gone as I moved through the door, and I had to force myself to lower my gaze, feeling dazed and vacant and serenely dizzy.